Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Get Real with Kacey Kasem, the podcast that goes behind the scenes of the fantasy football industry through interviews with some of your favorites in the business. For this episode, I was joined by Chuck Bass. No, not of Gossip Girl, but of This Guy Sucks podcast. We talked about a ton of things, including how Chuck found fantasy football, why he named the podcast This Guy Sucks, what kind of content he likes to consume, how he goes about putting out video content, his dog Groot, his experiences with live drafts, and a ton more. Make sure to check out Chuck on Twitter at ChuckBassFF. You can follow me, Kacey Kasem, at @KaceyKasem, and the podcast at GetReal_pod. You can find my content with Rotoballer, Fantasy Six Pack, and South Harmon Fantasy Football. And check out SundayDreamersClub.com for some awesome fantasy football inspired t-shirts and sweatshirts. Again, that's SundayDreamersClub.com. This podcast is a proud member of the DAP Network. And now, here's my conversation with Chuck Bass on Get Real with Kacey Kasem. So thank you so much for coming on Get Real with Kacey Kasem this morning. We have Chuck Bass with us today. First question I have for you, Chuck, though, is do you get Gossip Girl fans coming up to you and being like, Chuck Bass, you're not Chuck Bass. I know Chuck Bass.
Well, that's a loaded question. First of all, no, because I don't get any fans coming up to me for anything at any point in time. I blend in with the crowd a little bit too much, I think. But the Chuck Bass thing, it's so funny you say that. I was on a stream last night with some guys over at the Rat Pack Fantasy Football Show. And a guy asked me, he was like, so this is a bit, right? You're doing a bit. You have another name and you've made your name Chuck Bass just to get some recognition. And I was like, no, you're going to have to talk to my parents who lived in Florida in the 80s if you want the answer. Right. We all know what was going on down there in the 80s. So I don't know. Just this is my cross to bear, and it hasn't bitten me yet.
I only knew that because my wife used to be a Gossip Girl fan. So I was like, when I saw the name, that's the first thing that I associated with it. But that's not what we're talking about today. Nobody really cares about Gossip Girl. If you do, I'm sorry. Please continue to listen to this podcast. But we're going to actually care about the real Chuck Bass that we have right here with us today. So let's get started just talking about growing up. How was your relationship with sports? Did you watch sports, play sports, or what exactly was your relationship like?
You know, I always thought I was going to be like Peyton Manning, Tom Brady, which is really weird because I never played football growing up, but I still thought I was going to be them for whatever the reason is. I don't know. It's so funny that you asked that because I don't think I've processed it. You know, like when you process tragedy way later in your life, you feel like an adult and you feel like you come to terms with something. I don't think I processed like how poor my sports fandom was growing up as a child. I was rooting for, you know, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the Tampa Bay Rays, you know, all these like laughing stock franchises. But you're a little kid, so you know, you go to the game so you can get corn dogs and ice cream cones and helmets and all that stuff, and you're just having fun. And then you grow up and you start to care, and you're like, oh no, I'm screwed. This is gonna be terrible. But I always found that I liked sports more than like my friends and my friend group, whether it was like, you know, school or church groups or anything like that, just like random stuff. And then I discovered fantasy football at a certain age, and it all went downhill. So I'm trying to balance the fandom and the bias and the passion and the intrigue and all that good stuff daily. I'm still struggling with it.
Oh yeah, that's a real hard one. I am the exact same way, so I feel you there. When you were growing up, did you have like a favorite player that you were really into?
Oh yeah. The A Train, Mike Allstott, he will always be my sports goat. Just checked all the boxes you would want from a player, especially one that plays for your own team. You know, I think I always had a soft spot for Bucks players, not just because they were my team, but because they were viewed as like people don't even really, I'm still not sure how much of the country is aware that Tampa Bay has a pro sports team. So there's always that kind of like underdog aspect that I loved. And he was just a fullback / running back running the show. Just, you don't see that anymore. So the further we've gotten away from his play time, the more his legend has grown. So I do appreciate his, the respect he does seem to get. And he's the only jersey I consistently wear.
Hey, that's awesome to have a. I wish I had a jersey I consistently wore. Maybe Travis Frederick. I think I can say that that's been
That
lately.
plays
Yeah,
that plays big
yeah.
time.
I mean, that's a fun jersey to have, but yeah. So, fantasy football is something you brought up, and obviously people listen to
Mhm,
this show to kinda get the insight from the people behind the scenes
mhm,
of fantasy football, and I
sure.
wanna know kinda what your journey into finding fantasy football was like.
You know what? It was one that if I could go back in time, I can't tell if I would punch myself in the face a little bit to, if I could see, like the meme of um, Matthew McConaughey in Interstellar, where he's like punching the glass, seeing his like past self leave. That's kind of how I feel sometimes. But you know what? All roads led me to be on this podcast, so I have to be thankful for that. I have a funny story of how it all kind of started to where I got detention when I was in 8th grade, and my detention, I was the only one in after that had to stay after school that day, and the teacher didn't really care all that much, so he let me go on like the class computer, and they had you could only go on a few networks back then, and one of them just happened to be NFL.com, and I think it was like preloaded, like a preloaded tab on Yahoo browser, and I just stumbled upon it, and then I just click in, and I found myself signing up for like a free NFL fantasy game, and I drafted, and it was like trying a drug for the first time. I was like, what is this whole world that I've not that I've ever tried drugs, but you hear about them. Um, and I just ended up winning a random league with random players the first time I ever played, and I have been chasing that high ever since. My friends didn't play at the time. It wasn't being covered like it is now at the time by the networks. It was still like if you wanted to get information on it, you were reading magazines or anything like that. If you're ever flying, traveling, what have you. Just I have a real fondness for that period of my life because it was like innocent first love, and now it's like a rough patch in a marriage. So I long for those days.
Did you ever like when you first started playing fantasy football, how was that league set
Mhm.
up exactly? Was it redraft, dynasty? What kind of
Mhm.
settings did you have? Can you remember?
So that one in particular was just like a standard scoring, one quarterback, two wide receivers, one tight end, defense, kicker, like very, very missionary style. And I didn't even. And then once I started getting into leagues with my friends, I didn't start playing PPR scoring and getting more into like dynasty or exotic formats. Well, like into like the mid 2010s. And I don't know. That was a little it was a little less in vogue then than it is now, kind of like with all the wide receivers coming into the league and all the different, running backs catching more passes now, all that stuff. It's become a little bit more of the norm. But back in the day, it was just the amount of effort and things you had to worry about. It's like when you watch you see movies from like the 40s and the 50s, and you're like, other than nuclear war, they really didn't have a whole lot to worry about back then. It was kind of like living blissfully ignorant. And I miss that a little bit.
I feel you there, though. I feel you there.
Mm-hmm.
So, going on from just starting in a random league with random people and then getting to where you are now, did you have leagues that you started joining with people that you knew, or how did that
Mm-hmm.
start to happen?
Yeah, it started to become a little bit more popularized, Matthew Berry holding it down, kind of, leading the charge for everybody. And, your friends start to playing with friends in college. I always found it was a great way. I kind of used it as like a social, I don't want to say a social ladder because I wasn't trying to climb anywhere, but it was always like, I like this group of people. I'd like to hang out with them more. Let's get in a fantasy league with them. I like, and that's kind of, I do that now even, with people I meet through Twitter or, at the expo or just people in the space or even just people that I enjoy, socializing with like, oh, okay, I know how to take this relationship a little bit further, let's play in a fantasy league together. And you're going to see what I think the best that I have to offer is. So it's, the friend thing, I still have my home leagues. I've got a couple of those, and it's been really like such an easy way to, easy is the wrong word. They can't choose whether or not they want to keep in touch with me because fantasy comes around every same time every year. And if they think they're getting out of this relationship, they're They're gonna have to move out of the country or something because otherwise I've got them for life.
Have you ever done a live draft?
Oh, we were just reminiscing about these last night. I miss
I
live drafts and I
I
rarely
know.
get to do them. And you've got the live draft boards behind. I love it. It's such a it's like the ultimate aspect of all of this, from like the human part to, the actual strategy to like the physicality of it. We live in the digital age and it's like that wholesome, humble, just slapping a sticker on there. I maybe do one a year now, thanks to the Scott Fishbowl drafts. I got to do that in Cincinnati last year, and hopefully get to do another one this year if I didn't wear out my welcome. But no, it's all digital for me otherwise. And I gotta say, I don't love that aspect. I don't know who in my community. I've moved to Kentucky, and I've made some friends here, but not really. I haven't been able to capture them in my fantasy football web to the extent that I would like. So I'm still just drafting from my phone, like a lot of other people are, I suppose. What about you? How many live drafts do you think you get in a year?
Man, it used to be a few, but now everybody lives in different
Yeah.
places. So we try to get as many people together as we can that still live in the area for like my home draft. And
Yeah.
so, it's not the same as like having everybody there in person. We were doing it where
Mhm.
we had play people call in, do Zoom calls and all
Yeah.
that, and we just put the
Nice.
stickers up for them. But
Yeah.
then it started getting to a point where people were like, we don't why don't we just use the app? And I'm like, I guess you're not as,
Yeah.
enthused about this as I am. So
Mhm.
Scott Fishbowl, I guess, is one that, Dallas has been doing it last year. And then
Mhm.
this year we're doing it again. So I'll be in that. And then whatever at the expo I end up doing, if that's Queen's Classic or Draft Night Out, I
Mhm.
don't know which one I'm going to do this year. So yeah.
Draft night out's a blast. That would say I would be beside myself if I didn't mention them in this little part here. They put on a great event, and that's been my favorite part of the expo the last 2 years, just because it is kind of like that not only that thing we all have in common, but that thing we all love. So for
Hmm.
them to be hooking us up with that, it's always fun.
Yeah, I really like Draft Night Out. And I've tried to get to as many as I can, and do all that stuff with them. And,
Mhm.
I had the opportunity to do the Queen's Classic last year. That's why I was like, okay, let me jump on that. And so we'll
Mhm.
see. It happens to be at the same time usually, so I
Sure.
have to make my choice wisely there. So we'll see what happens this year. I'm not sure. When we'll get
Mhm.
more into the expo too, I know, and the Scott Fish Bowl as well. I know everybody's excited to talk about that, and I will get to that. But I know I know you went to college, Auburn. Uh,
Mhm.
are you a fan of college football? Speaking of, Auburn, so
Yeah, it's that's one I also wrestle with. I was pretty passionate while I was there, just as a lot of people are, but the further I've gotten away from it, I don't follow the recruiting trail. I don't follow, I would say if you were to rate it on a scale of like 1 to 10, I'm probably like my commitment to the brand is maybe like a 3, but my fan passion is like a 10 when the season's going on. And that's, kind of how most people are, but also you just see a lot of people who they can tell you like where their 3-star recruit ate 4 nights ago and whether or not he enjoyed his meal. And that's just not my bag. And it's a very unpredictable sport. So I don't find a lot of pleasure in keeping up with that kind of stuff day to day. Especially, maybe if Auburn was a little bit better and we didn't have Alabama giving us a swirly what feels like every other year on the reg. Georgia's doing that now too. I literally cannot escape the nightmare. So maybe I've psychologically done that to myself subconsciously.
my f- my mom's side of the family lives in Alabama, and they're Alabama
Mhm.
fans. So I just remember being a kid and just hearing all kinds of trash talk about Auburn. Like that's all we
Yeah.
heard when we went to visit. My cousins just
Th- Yep.
yapping
That's how
away.
they live. That's happening right. That's probably happening right now as we're talking. That's going on all across the state, all across the South. It is their way of life.
So how was your college experience? What did you go to school for, and how was all of that?
Mm. College, I'm trying to always figure out if I've romanticized my college experience or not the further and further I get away from it. Because I always think back now, it's where I met my wife, and we've been together for 10 years now. So, kind of like instead of looking back at that time as like, I don't know, classes and going to, parties and, doing all your traditional college experience, now I kind of just associate it with like where I met my wife and all the memories we started to build there. But I went for, what did I go for? Radio, film, and television. I wanted to be, Scott Van Pelt. I wanted to be, just any like, and then you branch out even to like the Colin Cowherds and all those guys. Maybe not him specifically, but that pathway. And I actually changed majors halfway because I wasn't finding the journalism aspect as rewarding. I think I just, I don't know, maybe I just wanted to be on TV without doing the work. And when you're 21, that's a harsh reality. So I switched to hotel restaurant management. I always loved working in events, working in service industry stuff, hospitality, that kind of thing. And I did that for a few years postgraduate. It kind of led me to what I do now, which is a little bit outside of that, but it's all come full circle because now I actually am on streams. I am on lovely podcasts like Get Real. So maybe had I stayed the course, I would have expedited all this a little bit quicker.
So, okay, let's get into fantasy football content creation because another
Oh
thing
yeah.
that people tune in for, and I get really
Mm.
excited to talk about this. First and foremost, like, how did you stumble into the world of putting out content?
Mm. That's a great question because you get a lot of cliche answers from this, and then you also get a lot of great, individualistic, thoughtful answers. And I think I'm somewhere in between as to where I just did what I think a lot of people do, whether they vocalize it or not, is they get to a point where they're listening to a podcast or they're watching people talk about it on television or on the internet, and they're going, I know more than this person, and I think I can put out a better product than this person does. And they're usually wrong. And I think I'm 0 for 2 on that one, but I'm not going to say it's for lack of effort. I thought there was maybe at the time that I got into this, which was 2021, I thought there was a lane for maybe a little bit more heavy on the entertainment and the comedy side than there with, information and with, not just, hot take BS nonsense, just kind of maybe playing it more like if Bill Burr hosted a fantasy podcast, like kind of like that kind of thing, because it's a never ending well of disappointment and anger. And I've always found that I'm good at channeling that into, something funny or something, that people can latch on to. So I've just been, trying to stay true to that as I sit before you here today.
When we appreciate you for that because you do have a great thing going
Mm,
with This Guy Sucks. I want to know
mm,
more
mm,
about that. And first of all,
mm.
foremost, how did you come up with the name for that? And then how did you come up with like
Sure.
the concept of what you were going to do?
Mm. Well, the name was imperative because, you really just have to draw people in. You can either go one of two ways, right? You can have like the fantasy football blank. You can have a cool name like yours, which I love. I do have to say, you have one of best names, not just the Get Real. Every time I hear Get Real, it evokes like 90s MTV VJs for me, or like, it's just like that era that I love so much and I'm so fond of. So hats off to that. And I just knew I wasn't really cool enough to go the cool route, and I didn't know enough to go like the informative route. So I just went with like I don't know, you're watching the game with six friends and one of your guys drops a pass, and what's the first thing you say? Oh, this guy sucks. So I just kind of decided to ride the wave with that. I think it says everything about, what kind of content we put out and my viewpoint on all this stuff, because, it does not matter how long an NFL player plays in the league. At some point, they're going to let you down in the smallest way or the biggest way possible. So I think it's kind of an endless stream of resources that I get to dip my toe in.
And with the background that you had in college and
Mm,
everything, and being in front of the
mm,
camera now, having a microphone and actually having to like listen to yourself talk and do all of
mm,
that, were you always comfortable, or was that something that you had to
mm.
get accustomed to?
I think I had to get accustomed to it big time. I still, to this day, I get nervous before I record. I don't want, I start recording and you're interacting with the guest, it starts to feel more natural. But I do always have that kind of, there's a balance between being unprofessional and being kind of, wild and laissez-faire and kind of, hey, we don't judge around here. And that's how a lot of, I approach a lot of this, but also at the same time, you ask people to come be on your show, you ask them to take time out of your day. You don't want to just, you don't want to be dropping the ball or making it a negative experience. So, hosting, balancing, those little, 2 or 3 second pauses, making sure the guests know, kind of setting them up to succeed, letting them, giving them cues to speak, not, like I would say the thing I still struggle with the most is if I have multiple guests and I pose maybe a question or a talking point and I haven't indicated maybe who should talk first or, kind of like the rhythm and flow. That's something you can't really prepare for unless, you've done it a lot of times. And I still struggle with it, as recently as yesterday.
So how do you get prepared when you have a guest coming on the show? Do you do your research
Mm,
beforehand to kind of figure out
mm,
how they podcast, or
mm.
what
Yeah.
exactly do you do when you reach out to people?
I would say the number one thing is I go to their Twitter and I go to where you can search for keywords in their Twitter and I type in every expletive I can think of to see when this person has sworn, what kind of language they use when they swear, what is the topic they were talking about, just to kind of see um, how far we can push the rating when I have them on. And I don't, some people I have on that are sweet and innocent and it's kind of, they have a more family approach and I always respect that. And some people on and they talk in a way that would make a hooker blush. And so I try to capture all aspects of that. So I start with a little research on the guest, always try to, keep them within a realm of their expertise. I don't want to bring somebody on just to talk about something that I want to talk about. I like to include recent work that they've done, highlight some of the stuff they've been doing, and then, put them in a position like you're putting your guests in, which is, all right, let's also get behind the curtain a little bit, understand them. I always like to, just talk about their background and kind of how, put a mind to the voice.
Got you. So having guests on your show, how do you go about
Mm.
obtaining guests to come on?
Mm. I would say to this point right now, it's always been somebody that I have a lengthy interaction history with on Twitter, or I've played in leagues with them. Just somebody that I have a rapport with already that kind of makes it a little bit more organic when we're speaking, a little bit more history I can jump in. I've gotten more relaxed with that requirement lately just because I'm trying out just having people on and making it a place that anybody can step into, whether they have familiarity with me or not. They can kind of showcase their talent and what they've been working on. So I'm trying to become a little bit more flexible with that. But I'm also like, I'm just trying to get the reps in as often as I can, having, people on and having people on that have experience so that they know they can pick up slack if I'm dropping the ball in one way or another. That way, that day when I can just invite anybody on, they've got a professional environment. They can pop on in and embarrass themselves publicly.
I do that every time somebody invites me on, I kind of embarrass myself. So it's okay.
That's
And
fun.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
fun.
it is fun. It's fun. And yeah, getting the reps in, I'm glad you brought that up because yeah, I feel like I get more comfortable every time I do these. And I look and I'm like,
Mm.
wow, I just dropped episode 105 and I'm like, so I've been doing this for a while and I'm still kind of nervous before I get on a show.
Yes,
But
yes, yes,
at
yes.
least,
I feel the same way.
yes. At least I feel a little bit more prepared than I did when I first started. Like, once you start
Mm.
getting in a flow, you kinda
Yeah,
continue that into the next show, so that's always good.
yeah.
When
Mm.
when you first started, were there any challenges that you had to face or something that came up that maybe took you,
Mhm.
you were just trying to figure out maybe how you could go about fixing a problem?
Yeah, sure. I would say I overthink things that I don't think matter tremendously. One of those being the setup of a show, maybe physically, where my microphone is, the background, the placement of a specific bourbon bottle behind me that I will put. And I always wait like 10 minutes before the show starts. I don't give myself any time to, like, it's something I should have handled hours ago. And instead, we're about to record like 3 minutes before, you message me and I'm like, I should make some coffee before a show. Like, why would I brew a pot of coffee 5 minutes before I'm about to go live? I just think that it's things like that I still, flow of a show, making sure, you hit the things from, hey, have you liked and subscribed, to check out their work here, making sure you're encompassing all that. I hate having, like, I really don't want any of this to ever be about me or the brand or anything like that. So I always feel so having to say, please like, or please subscribe, or check out my work and all that. Like, it's important. It's how you, it is how you grow. And it is a level of professionalism you got to bring, but also at the same time, it's like pulling a tooth out of me to get me to say any of that stuff. So just relaxing a little bit, and it's coming together.
Yeah. I feel like I'm the same way. Like, I love to tell everybody, like, thank you for listening. Like, I appreciate all
Yes.
that. The like, subscribe, and all that stuff's kind of the secondary stuff. I do know that you have to do that to get your show out there for more people to listen to and everything. But yeah, totally. So when you go into podcasting, exactly, like, how do you determine how you're gonna go over all the different topics that you want to go over? Do you have a show sheet? Do you have notes? What exactly do you do to prepare for the podcast?
I definitely do a show sheet. I love, because I'm a little unhinged myself. I need, like, I don't have a producer, so I need to like create the producer on the screen to be able to move the show along. Because otherwise, I will just run off on stuff, and I'll be like, we've got to circle back. I like that too, because it brings a flow to the show that I think otherwise, I think it's noticeable when you don't. Especially if it's something that you rely on traditionally. So I'll work up a show sheet. And then as soon as we start recording, I'll almost always completely not follow it, which is, I don't know if that's the way it should be, but because I've done it already, I've got the itinerary in my head. I can kind of go beat by beat. I always like it because, I like to throw little jokes in on the show sheet, and I won't remember to say them if I don't like look at it while we're recording. And I don't like to force stuff, but I do think that sometimes I can be a little bit of a better writer than I can be freestyling and ad-libbing. And, so I want to respect that part of my brain. If I come up with something funny pre-show, I always want to make sure I remember it, so that I can kind of, that makes for great clips. That makes for moments that, people in the comments, if they're watching live, love, that kind of stuff. So just, following the beat. I recommend a show sheet for anybody, depending on no matter what kind of form they're doing, just a little something.
Yeah. I'm the bad person that never gives a show sheet to anybody, but I'm like, well, we're basically going to talk about you, so I don't know what else you would need to know. But yeah, it's just a
You are
general
the
basic.
you are the show sheet
I am the
for
show
me.
sheet. Thank
You're
you.
yeah.
I appreciate that so much. I wish
Mhm.
I had a show sheet, because maybe then my questions wouldn't be rambling like they always are, and I have to go in and edit to figure out what I'm trying to say to the guest. But
Doesn't come
so,
off that way, I assure you.
well, I appreciate that. I've had issues with
Mhm.
that for a while. That's like my big critique on myself, is like, get to the point. Hey everyone, Kacey Kasem here. I want to take a moment to tell you about Sunday Dreamers Club, my fantasy football inspired t-shirt store. If you're looking for unique, stylish, and comfortable apparel that showcases your love for fantasy football, look no further than sundaydreamersclub.com. Whether you're gearing up for the next big game, hosting a draft party, or just want to sport some awesome gear, Sunday Dreamers Club has got you covered. With a variety of designs and styles to choose from, there's something for every fantasy football fan out there. Your support means the world to me, and there are so many ways you can help me grow this new small business. Grab a shirt or two for yourself, or as a gift for your fantasy football league mates, or you can spread the word to your friends and family. Every bit helps, and I truly appreciate your support. Thanks for listening, and now let's get back to the show. So if you have any kind of critique on how you do things, is there anything that you may be a little harsher on yourself than most people?
Yeah, I don't ever push back if ever is a strong word. I don't, if somebody makes a point, I don't think I do enough to maybe say, no, that's wrong, or I disagree with that. I think maybe I present it in like a very passive aggressive, like, well, some people are saying that, like I'm like some moderator on a debate or something like that. When in reality, I'm not like that anywhere else. I don't know if it's just because I'm so happy to have the guest on, or if maybe I choose my guests so well that I do agree with what they're saying. But I just think like so many things, especially in fantasy football, NFL, all of that, it's contextual and it's can be subjective just based upon like what's important to you and what you value and what you get out of it. So it's almost hard for me to say I don't agree or I don't subscribe to that train of thought. And I usually float towards a little bit more of like, I could see the other side here, but I wish, not that I want to create or breed conflict, but I think I just if I pushed back on my guests a little bit more, I think it would make for a more enjoyable program.
Is there anything that you wish you would have known when you first started podcasting and putting out content that, you know, would have really saved you some
Mm.
time or would have saved you some hassle?
I wish I knew how much I was going to hate editing. Um, and you know what? I think had I known that, had I really been able to capture that disdain in the beginning, I'm not sure how much further down the path I would have gotten. That I have a tremendous amount of respect for any content creation where I can see the level of editing that goes into it. You can feel it. And I don't do complicated stuff. It really is just kind of like your baseline level of work that I put into it. But I just, I've kind of gotten out of my traditional recorded and releasing podcasts on Spotify and Apple as of lately, just because the way I was doing my podcast required a lot of editing, nothing complicated, but a lot of it. And man, it was just grinding and sucking the life out of me. And it felt like a chore. So
Mhm.
I think now that if I could have gone back and maybe told myself something, it would have been to maybe pursue what I'm currently doing right now, which is the video form, the guest interaction form. Because it is still really a big hobby for me more than it is, a second job or anything like that. So when you're not getting, when it becomes a chore and a drag regularly, then I think you're not getting as much out of it as you would like. So I wish I had pushed myself into what I'm doing now earlier.
Feel you on the editing thing. Like that is one of the things that I do not look forward to, even though it looks
Yeah.
like I don't do that much. I'm like, yeah, but it's a time consuming, you know? So like
Yeah.
I could be using my time to
Yeah.
do other stuff, but I can't
It's like
afford to
when,
pay somebody.
yeah, no, I completely agree. It's like when you've cooked a meal and you've enjoyed it, and then you walk into the kitchen and you're like, shit, now I have to clean up.
Yeah.
It's that same exact feeling. I think early on too, I just got suckered in by seeing like talking to friends being like, hey, pull up Spotify and type this in and seeing it. And that was kind of like a cool moment. And then I kept trying to
Mhm.
chase that
Yeah.
and, or not chase it, but support it. And now I don't feel the same.
Well, putting out video content, because that's a thing I know that that's been around for a while, but I feel like more people are
Mm,
putting out video content, more short form video
mm,
content, more
yep.
it's just there's a lot of it out there. How do you make sure that you stay
Mm,
fresh and relevant and that your podcast, continues that
mm.
your YouTube channel continues to grow?
That's one that I'm currently in like the middle of. If this was a company, we would be on a business retreat somewhere trying to figure this out. Because I know the pathway and I know what's successful for people and I even know how to do it. It is really just about finding the time and the consistency to do it, so that it's more instinctual than it is sitting around one of the things I mentioned earlier was I overthink some things, and I think I overthink those like shorts, short term short term videos, just anything like that. In the reality is, in a lot of those, it's one of two things in my world. It's like the content you're putting in, and then if the editing you put into some of those, like Jagger May, the fantasy blue chip, he for me is the standard for like the kind of content I want to create in those short term videos that he does, which is like concise information that's funny, and then he mixes in some videos with it too that just really like cherry on top all the way. So I'm doing the best I can to not copy him with some of the stuff that I'm working on, but he's definitely a shining light in that regard.
His episode will have already aired, but I haven't put it out yet. But I did talk to
Mm,
Jagger as well. So yeah,
yeah,
it's cool to
he's
hear
great.
both of you guys. Yeah, great. You guys are both great
Mm,
guys and putting out great
mm,
video content, and I
mm,
enjoy taking that content in. Are you a consumer
mm.
of fantasy football content as well, or do you
Mm.
avoid that kind of stuff because you have your own stuff going on?
I wasn't at first, and I would say that's a huge mistake to any and everybody out there as they're coming up in the industry, even if their industry is well. Listening to your peers, listening to how people approach things, there's so much to be gained from, how they do things, to little ideas, to inspiration for all kinds of stuff. It's tough, and it's like that in a lot of industries, right? Everybody's in their own lane going to a different destination, but we're all kind of traveling the same direction. I think in order to, build the connections, in order to build a network of people, familiarity, all of that, you really do have to be supporting the people that are doing something similar in this industry, because otherwise, not only do you really stand out in my mind as somebody who's just kind of like a taker and not a giver, but also there's no excuse for it. It's all free, basically. It's all readily made available. And it's a lot of it is really good content. So I consume a lot regularly, podcasts, listening to stuff on YouTube, watching stuff on YouTube. I put YouTube on my phone and just put it down and work sometimes. It's not always a visual medium, but I just anywhere I can get your all stuff, I'm trying to get it just because I think there's so much to be gleaned from it.
Yeah, when I was working in the office, like I would have my
Mhm.
YouTube or have my podcast just
Mhm.
constantly. So like I'd get 8 hours a day of content because,
Yes, yes,
you
yes,
know,
yes.
and now I'm like,
Yeah.
wow, I haven't watched a podcast, listened to a podcast, or done any of that in
Mhm.
months. And I'm like, I really need to find a time to like get that in.
Yeah.
So when you consume content, is there a specific type of content that you're more drawn to, or it doesn't even have to be fantasy football related, but like when you consume content, what do you like to
Mhm.
consume?
I really go out of my way to mix it up as much as possible so that when you hear me or you see my tweets, you're not seeing the same kind of opinion or the same take on 10 different platforms. I don't know how big of a fan, or not fan's the wrong word. In The Office, there's this episode where six of them have invested in this company in like this idea that Ryan the temp has, like Woof, I think is what it's called. And it's like it's this, if you send a message on Woof, it sends it to like your email, text message, updates your profiles on social media. It's like delivering one message 10 different places. And it's a subplot of one of the episodes. And that's like my biggest fear, is that I'm just going to be like, I pop on this show and I say this, and then you see me on another show and I say the same thing. And I think the easiest way to avoid that for me is to be consuming all of these different opinions, from dynasty best ball drafts to who has the most at stake in the NFL draft to which NFL fan base sucks the most. Like I really want that jack of all trades, full experience, try every meal at the food court in the food hall kind of mindset.
Speaking of NFL draft, because that's coming up, even
Mm,
though this episode's going to come out after
mhm,
the draft. Sorry, guys, but
sure.
that's just how it is. But
Mm,
how do you get before the draft? Are you excited about the NFL draft? Do you watch it? What is
mm.
your experience with the draft like?
So I used to love the draft, and I mean would watch every pick. I would just love the experience. I love, these kids who were just, with their families, and now every kid has like a 4K camera in his house and 400 people at the barbecue, and they're all going nuts. So it's become this really fun thing. But now I have to be honest with you, these last two drafts, I've experienced such fatigue as we get close to the draft. A lot of the storylines and the narratives were pretty cemented early on in the process, and now it's just a bunch of people picking really annoying hairs that I kind of struggle with. I don't think that we're 2 weeks out now, or I guess, what are we? Yeah, we're 2-ish weeks out. It's just the horse was killed a long time ago, and people are still beating it pretty strong. So I think I'm gonna pump the brakes a little bit and maybe avoid draft content. That way I can go in with, sober, ready to rock, ready to consume as much as I possibly can, because it's a really, really unique, fun event. And it's one of the best for content creators. It's one of the best
Mhm.
3 or 4 days of the year.
Yeah, I look forward to it. Just watching it with a bunch of people and drinking is
Yeah.
always always on
Yes.
my
Yeah.
always
Have
on
you
my
been to one?
schedule. I've been to one. I went to one when it was at the AT&T Stadium in Arlington,
Awesome.
Dallas.
Yeah.
So I went
That's
to
great.
that. Yeah, it was. Well, I mean, we didn't really. We got in at like the last round or something. Like we on the first
Sure.
day or the second day. We
Mm.
showed up because there was a content creator there that I wanted to meet. So that's why I went to the
Mm.
draft, not
There you
for
go.
the actual experience of being at the draft, but it
Always
was fun.
grinding. Always
Always
grinding. Nice.
grinding.
That's how it goes.
Gots to, you gots to.
Mm.
So, okay, how do you balance like your work life, like 9 to 5, and
Mhm.
fantasy football content, and then having a
Mhm.
life outside of all of that? How do you balance it to make sure that you're grounded?
So that depends on who you ask. If you ask me, I'm killing it. If you ask my wife or my boss, I'm not sure if you would get the same answer to the question, but we each have a vote in this. That is a tricky one. My work, I'm on a computer 8 to 10 hours a day. I work for Pepsi, and so I'm doing analytical stuff for them online all day, any days. So I'm basically like perpetually online, which is a phrase I heard. I think I heard that from Andrew Cooper, and I've been appropriating that one pretty regularly. So I am kind of always working on one thing or another. It's just kind of a part of my job. So the work balance is pretty smooth. The family balance, we'll see. I'm expecting my first child in 3 weeks, and
Congratulations.
thank you very much. I appreciate that. Very excited, very terrified, but gotten a lot of support from a lot of people, so I'm happy for that. But I have had to sit. When I ventured into this whole fantasy football podcast space, I sat down with my wife and I was like, if this becomes a thing, and when I meant that with a negative context, you let me know so I can pull back. And we haven't had to have that conversation yet, which is good. But there's definitely times where I'm like maybe checking Twitter a little more than I should. And she's like, hey,
Yep.
mister, check in here. And I got to put the phone down and get my stuff together. So hopefully a baby makes that easier.
Hopefully. I mean, I'm in the same boat when it comes to like I shouldn't be on my phone, but what if it's
Mhm.
important? And she's like, I'm
Yeah.
important. Okay, okay. I get it. I
Yeah.
get it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
That's a tough one to argue against.
Yeah, exactly. So
Mhm.
you had brought up the Fantasy Football Expo, and I'm sure, with a new baby coming soon, that it'll probably
Mhm.
be harder for you to get out there this year than it has
Mhm.
been in prior years. But what has your experience been like with the Fantasy Football Expo?
I think the first one I went to was in 2022. I went in blind and I went in with a friend. I used it as an opportunity to kind of go in and promote the brand, but that was not my intention. I was just going to meet people and have fun. And it was truly one of the best experiences I've had in my life, from a show up and kind of being on the same page with everybody immediately and not feeling anything otherwise, literally until I got home on Monday. I think it's one of the best events I've been to. They put a lot of care and effort into it. Bob does such a great job, and the whole team there. And it really is just kind of like that live draft feeling that we were talking about earlier. It is like 72 plus hours of that with people who you interact with every day online, and now they're there in person. I don't really have, there's like it's an endless list of good things I can say about that. And, you get to go do it in Canton, which is just like, the bread and butter, I'm wearing the shield. They'll never be more proud of a fantasy content creator than that right there. Just a really, really enjoyable time from start to finish.
And then when you go to an expo and you meet these people that you know from the fantasy football community, what
Mm.
is that experience like, getting to meet somebody in face to face?
It is easy. It's like what I think of, like that easy is the wrong word. It's gonna say that sounds probably douchey. But it is it's ultra organic because, and I'll give you an example. I was the first time that I went a couple years ago, my friend was upstairs. I think he was showering, and I went downstairs to, I think, get a beer. Just kind of take the edge off a little bit. I think it was like 8 a.m., something like that. No, it was like it was probably like 3 o'clock. But I was standing at the bar, and somebody to my left, I was waiting for the bartender to kind of notice me, which happens at the DoubleTree there. And somebody to my left, I was wearing the badge. I had that creamsicle Mike All-Star jersey on. He was like, "Hey, can I ask you a question?" I was like, "Yeah, what's up?" He's like, "Who would you draft here? I'm on the clock right now." And I had like a 15-minute conversation with somebody that I had never met, just about something that, was the reason I came to the expo. And that was happening all weekend. People come up and tap you on the shoulder and they're like, "Settle a debate, Mike Evans or Tyreek Hill." And you pop in and you get into it, and then you introduce yourselves, and it just grows and grows and grows. There's never a, I don't know, it just felt like a big house party, and the opportunity to expand and talk to people that, that are just like you, only, they have 100,000 followers. It's just a cool behind the scenes moment.
And you've had a booth at the Fantasy Football Expo too, right?
I have. The booth has been mixed reviews on the booth, but it was really just an opportunity to plant the flag. I did some live drafts there on a big screen TV with a bunch of random people, giving away some bourbon, just like love bombing people at the expo, which is, I don't know how appropriate that is, but I just love having kind of like a party booth where people can float in and out, and they know that if there's a lull in their afternoon or their part of the expo, they can always come on by and see what's going on, check things out. So I like that. And I felt like that fit more for the brand. I had all these grand ideas of all these things I was going to do, and I show up and I just drink and, talk smack about running backs and wide receivers with people for 5-6 hours.
Is there a specific memory that like really sticks out from being at the expo? Something that was like super cool, or like one of the experiences you got to participate in?
Ooh, that's a good one. As far as a moment that I look back at, one specific moment is tough. I will say, I think whenever I have like an image in my head of what I think back on at the expo, one of them for sure is those draft night out rooms, specifically of just seeing 20 live draft boards, 150 people all together, jerseys, BO, beer, all that kind of stuff, just guys and girls sweating it out, having fun, yelling at each other's picks. Just kind of like the cream of the crop of like what a heavenly fantasy football kind of fantasy football heaven looks like, minus the BO, of course. But I would say those, a lot of them too, I can't name just one person, but just meeting people whose work I respect so much day in, day out, chatting with them, about just nonchalant stuff. Just love that community aspect that I think is ever present there.
And then with the community aspect of the Scott Fish Bowl, that's another big event for fantasy football fans. Not everybody knows what that is. Go check out scottfishbowl.com. It's great.
Please.
Please. And thank you so much. But yeah, we had talked earlier about live drafts, and you had brought up the Scott Fish Bowl. Like, what has your experience been like with the Scott Fish Bowl?
So last year was my first year that I got to participate after knocking on the door for a while, but they let me in, and I appreciate that, and I will do my best to behave myself. Truly one of the great things we have going on, and really the shining beacon we have, in this is community. So I got to go to the Cincinnati one, which is really cool because we did 3. It's kind of, the hub of, a lot of the people who work for the Fantasy Cares organization, and they really blow it out. And I was really honored to be within driving range of that. So got to go up, they do it at a brewery, got to meet all these really cool people, people from PFF, people from Matthew Berry Fantasy Life, all the dynasty, DLF, everybody everywhere, John Bosch just running the show, killing things. And then, Cocaine Bear shows up, or the Cincinnati Bengals mascot shows up, and he shows up and I'm like, he's so funny. He keeps like taking stickers from the board that are Bengals players and putting them on over like people's picks, and it was like funny at first, but then he kept doing it. I was like, I don't want Tyler Boyd in the fourth round. Can we stop?
Please
Can
no.
we stop doing this? Give me a break here. But just a lot of fun, and love to know that that's happening all across the country.
Yeah, it's so great to be around all these people that are like-minded and just be around everybody that's there to experience a live draft, because like
Yeah,
I was talking about earlier, when you have people that aren't into it, then it's just not as fun as it could be. And so getting to go to a Scott Fishbowl live draft is super dope.
it
So
is.
anybody gets the opportunity, like you should definitely check it out if you have one near you. I'm going to 2 this year because I'm drafting in one and running one. I didn't want to do both at the same time because that was bad last year. So
Yeah, that's
my
hands full
excuse.
for sure.
That's
Yeah.
what, yeah.
Oh, 100%.
How did you end up
I liked
doing
it too. I
Yeah.
liked it too because there was this aspect of it to where, I was drafting with guys who were like, in my opinion, sharps, really, really
Yeah.
sharps. And I'm just a heavy user, It's like some people drink a lot of alcohol, but they can't really tell you about the process of how it's made. I'm a very heavy fantasy football player, and I'm in a draft with, Chris Allen, Nathan Jenke, guys who are just like, I really respect and glean a lot from the information they put out. And I'm watching them and they're sniping my picks. And I'm like, just several great players are sniping my picks. It's like such a good feeling. I felt like all these years of work that I put in are coming to fruition. Now I finished like close to dead last, but what are you going to do? It's all about the experience.
I'm glad you feel that same way when people snipe you, that like, hey, at least my thought process was right here. Other people are thinking the same way. When I take a
Yeah.
player and nobody says like, then I'm like,
Crickets.
wow, why did I take that? Why did I take that
Yeah.
player then?
Oh yeah. Sad
So
feeling.
I know it's a sad feeling. Scott Fishbowl though is like, it kind of makes it feel like the season's starting. Like it's one of those events that makes you feel like you're excited for it. July comes, and then we've got all the pre stuff that happens with the potathon and the
Yep.
t-shirt sales, the Avi makers, and all of that stuff. So how have you seen the fantasy football community come together during the Scott Fishbowl?
I like seeing people passive aggressively fight over which logos and merch is the best. They do it lovingly, and they do it with passion and pride and support. But I just love a bunch of people, it's very, for lack of a better analogy, it's almost like Game of Thronesian with all the different houses and how they're holding the banners for who they love and who they support. So shout out to the design team for all the work that truly the amount of work that goes into this event cannot be understated. And it's a pretty drawn out process too. They found a great way to keep people involved and interested, from, all the little contests they do to the eliminators and all that stuff. So just a lot of fun, and looking forward to seeing what logo and what banner I indoctrinate myself to this year.
How does the Scott Fishbowl scoring go with you? Like, how do you feel about the scoring? And how it changes every year, but like, especially like last year, how did you feel?
Last year might have broken my brain forever in regards to how I'm going to view fantasy football. It was just juicing the stats to the max, bringing back the running back position, no penalties for things like turnovers. I was just really, really happy. And I've tried to, this is where being a commissioner can be tough, because I know what's best for my league, and it's that. And now I want to implement it, and I don't want it to go to a vote. So I don't know if I need like special war powers or something like that, but it is really, it's made me numb to just the traditional way that we play the game. And I respect that, and I would love to see that continue. So I was a huge fan.
So how many leagues do you commission?
I commission, I think, 3 leagues. I commission 2 of my home leagues, and then another league I play with some other friends. And I hate it. I hate being the commissioner. I always love, being like instigating, stirring stuff up, causing drama, all that kind of fun reality TV show stuff. I don't, it's like editing, right? I don't like editing. Why would I like commissioning? Sometimes you got to do it to round up the troops because it's for the greater good.
Hmm.
And I'll die on that hill if I need to, but, shout out to the commissioners, respect them and all the nonsense they have to put up with our shenanigans year in, year out.
What do you think the hardest part of being a commissioner is? Like, is there any one specific thing you can
Mm.
think of?
I would say consistently it is the league dues and all that stuff, but I would say the hardest thing if when it comes up truly is um when there are shenanigans in that go on between the league, whether it's collusion or somebody drops all their players because they're pissed off or throws a hissy fit or, a trade veto or something like that. I'm vehemently anti trade vetoes. I like a strong, powerful commissioner to step in and wield the hammer when need be and, kick ass and take names and all of that. When those opportunities present themselves, which if you're in a standard league doesn't have all that much drama, but it does happen if you play in enough leagues. So, yeah, I would say that would be getting your guys in line, getting your guys and girls in line is number one.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I'm a commish of one league, and that's like one too many, it feels like sometimes. So,
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
what kind of leagues do you like to play in?
My bread and butter will always be redraft. I know who I am. Know thyself. What's the advice you hear and everything is know who you are, know what you love. I love blackjack. I'm a huge blackjack player. I love playing blackjack. So I like the change of scenery. I like the new players. I like all that. I'm getting more into Dynasty as I progress more into the community and the people that I associate myself with, for better or for worse. But I love best ball. I'm trying to get more into that as well. I just, there's so many dresses you can try on, and I am finding that I actually love going shopping. So I'm just pulling in any which way I can. I find myself struggling with the dynasty passion sometimes, just because I think it can be such a grind, and there's so much investment you have to have every week of the season. There's always somebody trying to hustle you. There's no breather, and I respect that aspect of it tremendously. And I'm trying to build my brain out there. But the redraft will always be my first love.
Right on. I like redraft a
Mm,
lot. I don't know if I like Dynasty more or if I like redraft more. Like, I'm back and
mm.
forth. Like, I'm doing more
Yeah,
Dynasty content right now just because, like, that's the
it's
time to do it.
yep, yep. This is dynasty
So,
season.
it definitely. So, I definitely
Mm,
trying to get more involved in I'm only in 3 Dynasty leagues, but that's, I'm in very few leagues in general compared to a lot of people.
yeah.
Do you know how many leagues you're in? Are you one of those people that has a lot of leagues, or how many leagues are you around?
I'm one of those people who says they're going to trim down their leagues and then joins more. I can't, I love the draft. I love drafting, and I find myself like, it's like that cooking and cleaning up analogy from earlier. I love the draft. That's eating the meal. And then managing the team is the cleaning up. And I hate that part. I hate it passionately. So, I think I'm probably in right now, as of this very moment, probably 10 leagues. Half of those are redraft, half of those are dynasty. And then, I'll crush some breast balls coming up, and I'll probably join in some more redraft leagues as we approach the season. Just that perfect amount where no matter what happens, it's good for you and bad for you. No matter like you're somebody scores, it's great. And then it sucks. So I'm trying to untip those scales a little, or tip those scales a little more so that I can feel something.
Well, best ball is definitely the way to go if you don't wanna have to, like, do too much after you draft. If
Mhm.
drafting is your favorite part, definitely, I've been getting into more best ball now because I'd
Oh
rather
yeah.
do that than mock draft, so let me do that.
Yep. Bingo. Bingo. Support the
Mhm.
cause.
There you go, there you
Mm,
go.
mm,
So,
mm,
with redraft being kinda like your bread and butter, do
mm,
you feel like sometimes people that play Dynasty look poorly on redraft, or do I know there's always a bad
mm.
egg every now and then, but how do you feel the Dynasty community feels towards the redraft community?
I think that they're getting better at having a general understanding that it's a shared space.
Mhm.
I found a lot of people online. A lot of people is strong is harsh. I'd say several. there's a train of thought to where like you're having an argument with somebody and they don't know you're talking about dynasty and you don't know
Yeah.
they're talking about redraft, and there's a
Hmm.
disconnect there. And I think sometimes it causes some friction. It's tricky. You can evaluate players in short windows, in long-term windows in their career. It's all projections, right? It's just you're applying it to certain different situations. There is always, it's like skiers and snowboarders on Johnny Tsunami. Like they're gonna always have that natural. They're not natural enemies, but they're frenemies. But I think that they're starting to, they're breaking bread together now more than they ever have, and I think that'll only continue.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. My only
Mm.
types of people that I really am not cool about are the ones that are like gatekeeping how you should play fantasy football.
Mm.
Like, don't do
Gross,
that. Don't get mad
gross.
at
Yeah.
somebody for the way that they play. If they're having fun, then let them have fun. Like,
Mm.
that's just my personal
Those people.
opinion on that.
Yeah, I could not agree more. And I think those people would be gatekeepers in anything else that they did. If it's hard to say where that stops and how much of that personality is, because you're right. You just nailed it. Let people play the way they want to play, and enough with the shenanigans.
Enough with the shenanigans. Wow, I can even say shenanigans. Here we go, shenanigans. Anyway, so let me ask you a question about like fantasy football in general. If you had one player in his prime, no matter what era the player's from, who would you want on your
Mm.
fantasy football roster if you could take them in their prime right now?
Oh, man, I had the same answer to this forever, and it's not the same answer anymore. It was Adrian Peterson, and he went ahead and decided to smash his own legacy with a branch, and so I'm not as big of a supporter of him as I was in the past. So if I had to pick somebody in their prime, somebody who really held down the fort, I'm gonna go with. Let's get a throwback answer in here. I'll go with LaDainian Tomlinson. Let's say he was like the standard prototype of what we love in running backs now and how he operates a system. And he was doing it before most people even really in the space started playing fantasy football. So just the level of respect I have for him and what he did early on some Chargers teams where like the running back just used to do all the work. And you just don't see that a whole lot anymore. And I'm starting to have a soft spot in my heart for these guys who 31-year-olds in 2002 who led the league in rushing yards and rushing touchdowns. Not that that was him, but just to give you like the old school thought. So give me some LaDainian Tomlinson in his prime. That's hot.
I like that answer. Good job. Great job. I
Hmm.
like it. So, is there a player right now or any players that you can think of that you've become a fan of because of fantasy football, not because of like what NFL team they're on or,
Mm,
what they do outside of football?
sure. I would say the one that really sticks out always is Austin Eckler for going to battle for us and showing the world that it's not just nerds in basements recording on equipment to talk about yards per route run. We're people too, and so he's really done a great job of not just being a great fantasy asset, but representing the community in a fun, engaging way. And I really respect that a lot from him. He's really dove in deep into that. And then I would give it to, there's always guys that, I Amon-Ra St. Brown is another one who I fell absolutely head over heels in love with through fantasy and then became to love him, and everything he is, from what he means to Detroit, to his family history, to, just churning out these elite seasons that he's been doing. It opens up, your world and the ways that you're able to. I've gotten to become friends with Detroit Lions fans because I drafted Amon-Ra St. Brown on my team 2 years ago. Like that's what this is all about.
Yeah, for sure. Oh, I love to see
Mm.
that. That's great. And
Yeah.
I'm glad you brought up Austin Eckler
Mm.
too, because it sucks when fantasy football gets this bad rap in with
Mhm.
football players. They like, don't tweet at
Yeah.
me, I'm not doing this for your fantasy team. They don't see
Mhm.
the value in fantasy football to have Austin Eckler be somebody that can stand up for us and kind of
Oh yeah.
is in the same boat as us. Is cool
Mhm.
to see. So I'm glad you brought his name up.
It is, and it definitely doesn't hurt that he was the number one or number two running back for a couple of years. It's a little harder to do that when you're a third stringer, still trying to fight to make the roster. When we've got a guy who was playing at an elite level, representing us, that feels pretty cool.
It's pretty cool indeed. So,
Mm.
what do you like to do in your free time? Because, 9 to 5 job, having a real job, having a real passion for fantasy football, having all this stuff. I mean,
Mhm.
life's real. We're getting real here. Life's real.
Yep.
What do you like to do when you do have free time?
A lot of my free time goes to this guy right here, my sweet, sweet boy Groot. I'm a huge dog guy. He comes to work when I go into the office. He comes with me. When I come home, when I leave work, I take him to the dog park. He's just a great reason to go out and do stuff. My wife and I, we love going out to eat. We love going to, horse parks, distilleries. I live in Lexington, Kentucky, so try to soak up some of the outdoor time as much as we can. I do some recreational stuff. I love playing kickball. I can't believe how much I love playing kickball. That is like,
Okay, yeah.
it always sounds like nobody thinks it's lame, but it's never really like something that people are terribly proud of. I am terribly proud of my kickball skills and my ability to cover the field. It's the closest I'll ever come to understanding what NFL players are going through. So love doing like that. Trying to get into more things. I'm trying to get into cooking, and that's hard. That's hard. I don't have that mindset quite yet. So we'll see how it goes. But I'm sort of wheel spinning until my little tyke gets here in a month, and we'll see what those hobbies turn into from there on out.
Gotcha. Does your pup make appearances in the background of podcasts? Because I know I have two dogs, and
Mm-hmm.
you can always, I say it's not a
Mm-hmm.
real podcast unless you can hear a dog in the background.
Yeah, I was just trying to call for him right there to see if he'll come say, hey, I call him the third character, like when the mailman, I have a little mail slot, like an old school mail slot that he sticks
Oh
the
yeah.
mail through, and he sticks dog treats through it as well because he loves our dog. And if he doesn't see him in the window where he looks out, if he's like upstairs or around the corner or something, the mailman will knock on the door so that Groot knows he's dropping a treat off for him. Always a little sweet, sweet gesture. And I do love when he pops on because he is a little sweetheart.
That's awesome. I'm also
Mm,
glad that you talked about kickball because I played kickball 1 year, 1 season. We tried to play it again the next season, and not enough people signed up. So we had to
mm.
just cancel it. And then I never played
Oh
again. But it was so
no.
fun. I
Ew.
know. I know. It was like, come on, guys. Like, seriously, we had a full team. We were ready to go, but there were only like 3 teams that actually like had enough people to play. So they were like, nah. But
Mm,
when I played, it was so much fun. So I totally get where you're
yeah,
coming from with that. It is a blast.
that's what I like to hear. Now, this is, I love this podcast, man. This is just all the good stuff I want to talk about.
All the good, I mean, yeah, I mean, that's the reason to come on the show is to talk about the good stuff,
Mm,
not the bad stuff. We don't want to talk about the bad stuff. Well, we talk about that enough in our everyday lives. We don't need to
agreed.
to rehash some memories.
Mm,
So before we go,
mm,
I know everybody's probably sad. I'm sad too. This has been a great conversation. Like Chuck, thank you so
mm,
much for coming on the show. Um, it's been a blast getting to talk to you, and I really
mm,
respect the content that you put out, and I look forward
mm.
to seeing more from you. But before we go, is there anything else you want to say? And if you want to go ahead and plug your stuff, go ahead and do that now.
Yeah, I would just say for anyone who's listening out there, who's been consuming all this content, who is, maybe they're, for lack of a better word, I don't want to say a lurker, but maybe they're not as involved in the community as they want to be. You would be shocked at how open almost everybody is, not just to having a dialogue with you, but to chatting with you about anything. I have people who reach out for the most obscure things that have as little to do with fantasy football or as much to do with it. It's really just a group. We are in this community, but we're multifaceted. That you'd be surprised how many people are down to join a league with you, who are down to drop in a mock draft with you, who would love to give you advice on anything from who you should trade for to which organic fruit you need to steer away from at Whole Foods. It's an endless stream. It's just people who want to connect. So I would say if you're a little bit more timid or reserved, or you're nervous for any reason, you would be surprised how quickly that would evaporate, just with some interactions.
Hmm. For sure. It's
Mhm.
such a good space. There's so many awesome people. Like, that's why I
Yeah.
like getting to talk to all of y'all, because you have a lot of insights that I don't have. You
Mhm.
everything. I learn new things every time I talk to somebody on this show. And so
Mhm.
I appreciate people like you who are willing to help others out. And, just it's a great feeling, and it's a great community to be a part of. So
Mhm.
definitely, definitely. So what all is going on with Chuck Bass right now? What do you have
Mhm.
coming up, and where can people find what you're doing?
Well, for my stuff right now, you can head over to the This Guy Sucks with Chuck Bass YouTube channel. I'm doing a lot of Twitter live streams, a lot of YouTube live streams. I'm just right now, I'm a little bit less focused on the core of the content and more on the people that I'm doing it with, people I want to have on the show, people I want to interact with, and then kind of letting the rest of the stuff come naturally. So we're doing some silly drafts. Last night we did the dick moves drafts, like things that people do that piss you off. Basically, we did worst fan bases draft, and we use those to talk about NFL points as well. But just the kind of environment to where you're hanging with your friends. That's always what I'm
Hmm.
trying to cultivate. So the rest of that, if not there, you can find me poking the hornet's nest on Twitter, which is kind of my go-to. And otherwise, just ready for this draft, ready for the off season, and ready for another 6 months of heartbreak.
Isn't that the truth? Oh man.
Sadly,
Well,
sadly.
what's not heartbreaking is well, actually, what is heartbreaking is we have to leave the show. But what's not heartbreaking
Yeah.
is we'll be back next week for another episode of Get Real with Kacey Kasem. So I look forward to everybody joining us. Please let Chuck know that you listen to this podcast and you appreciate what he does. Make sure you come back next week for another episode of Get Real with Kacey Kasem, and remember to stay rad.
Get real. Time to get real, everybody.